And as I look back and as we get down, because there are gunshots ringing out louder and closer, and I get up after we're in the clear and I see my cameraman and our security advisor running to get on the next car, our second car, with blood trickling down his forehead. I mean, we managed to get out safely. We got back to the hotel, but we had to keep reporting that day as M23 made their way into the city.
The big story is the escalating conflict in Democratic Republic of Congo. There's been fierce fighting as M23 rebels, backed by Rwanda, captured the largest city in the eastern region, Goma, which also saw the surrender of 300 Romanian mercenaries who'd been recruited to fight on the side of the army. The M23 group vowed to continue their offensive until they reached the capital, Kinshasa, which is 2,600 kilometres, roughly 1,600 miles away. Sky News Africa correspondent Yousra Elbagir has just left Goma and joins us now from South Africa. Yousra, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jeff.
Now, look, I understand that you were involved in a very serious situation here where you and your crew actually came under attack in Goma. Can you tell us what happened?
Absolutely. I mean, we had just arrived. When we landed, we saw the UN peacekeeping mission staff, non-essential staff, being evacuated. So we were kind of asking for it going in as people were leaving. But we went to film to kind of in the northeast of the city, where we heard that kind of hundreds of Congolese people were pouring in out of fear that M23 were approaching. So we wanted to go and film these people who were displaced, some of them for the second, third time. Little did we know that we were 5 kilometers from where an M23 incursion was happening. And reports were circulating that we could independently verify that the Rwandan troops provided a vanguard for those M23 rebels to come in. So we were very close to kind of the epicenter of the invasion, what people in Goma see very much as a Rwandan invasion. So we got down to film just to film, and then we heard 2 gunshots after feeling like we'd been watched and moving kind of further down the road. And then as we wanted to do a quick piece to camera and move, I noticed that a man was pointing at me and staring and yelling in Swahili. I was later told by our local producer that he was yelling that I'm Tutsie, Rwandan. The Tutsie tribe, particularly from Rwanda, there are Congolese Tutsis, and the M23 rebels are led by Congolese Tutsis. But in that moment, we were kind of thrown back to that murderous hatred that led to around 800,000 Tutsis being slaughtered in the Rwandan genocide over 30 years ago. Once, he was yelling and he leaned down to pick up a huge rock. So we started to move. They got a hold of my cameraman because there were men around him looking at his camera. And as we got in the first car, like they were trying to climb in, they were throwing rocks at the car. They broke the back of, the back window of the truck. And I managed to pull our local producer in as they were clawing at him. He also looks Tutsi, by the way, to pull him back into the street. And as I look back and as we get down, because there are gunshots ringing out louder and closer, and I get up after we're in the clear and I see my cameraman and our security advisor running to get on the next car, our second car, with blood trickling down his forehead. I mean, we managed to get out safely. We got back to the hotel, but we had to keep reporting that day as M23 made their way into the city and eventually captured it.
I mean, how have the people in Goma reacted to these rebels coming in? It must be terrifying.
I mean, they were sheltering for 2 days because it was a 3-day capture, and there was 1 day in the middle from that day we were attacked to when they took over the airport and the border. There was 1 day in the middle where it was constant shelling and artillery, heavy artillery, automatic gunfire. And people were sheltering in their homes without electricity or running water, and then mobile internet was disconnected. So the terror was definitely there. We were in our hotel, we were trapped there for 3 days, and we were, the lucky ones because we were surrounded by people who wanted to keep us safe. But there are videos of small crowds coming out and cheering and celebrating M23, but you're seeing people who really have no choice. These are now the people with absolute power. And when we did eventually manage to evacuate with the MONUSCO convoy led by M23 that was taking out the around 280 Romanian mercenaries. I managed to speak to a man on the side of the road, and he was kind of out of the window of the car because it was blocking the soldiers from seeing him. And I said, "Is this good or bad? Do you want M23?" He goes, "No, no, no, this is bad. This is bad, sister." And then, later on, I get him on camera and I try and get him to say the same thing in front of the rebels. And he makes it about the siege and how tough it was. So people don't have a choice. So when you see people celebrating, I mean, you're seeing people who are in a captured city. They don't have a choice. And it makes a lot of sense when you accept that hundreds of thousands have been fleeing areas of M23 control. And while we were there, we saw ferries loaded with people escaping via Lake Kivu. And even as we left, people were leaving through the border to Rwanda.
I mean, obviously, this conflict probably doesn't get nearly enough coverage in Western media, but can you just unpack for us a bit the main players in this conflict, and also talk to us about these Romanian mercenaries and describe for us how unusual that development is?
I think DRC has a curse of, too much. It's an incredibly rich, mineral-rich country, one of the most mineral-rich in the world, and it's incredibly fractured and fragmented. I think the last count I read was at least 122 militias operating in the DRC. So you're not just seeing people targeted by one front or the other. You're seeing a population that's completely at the mercy of armed combatants on a daily basis. So they've got constant massive displacement. It's the site of the UN's largest peacekeeping mission in the world. And that peacekeeping mission started 25 years ago as a result of the tribal tensions, the competition over resources, the political instability that came from the Congo wars that followed the Rwandan genocide. The Congo wars, the second Congo war, was called Africa's Great War. Just because the genocide, Rwanda technically became a separate country and protected, it doesn't mean that murderous, genocidal, I can't even explain it, this genocidal base where Congolese Tutsis are targeted by Hutu militias. Rwandan Tutsis are still watching Congolese Tutsis being targeted, but also not players who have nothing to do with the Rwandan genocide, who are civilians, feeling the complete instability of a Rwandan-backed insurgency, now moving them out of their homes for 2-3 times. I mean, end of 2023, I was in Rwanda and I met Congolese Tutsis in a camp who had to flee militias. And now I'm meeting people who are impacted by Rwandan-backed rebels and militias. And what it does teach me, I guess, is that though things seem to be resolved on the surface, it takes a lot more for these things to be resolved underneath. And unless these cycles are truly broken through real peacekeeping deals, ceasefires that actually resolve the intercommunal issues, then we'll see these cycles again and again.
Okay, well, Yousra, thanks so much for joining us, and I hope you're recovering okay from what sounds like a terrifying ordeal. That was Sky News Africa correspondent Yousra Elbagir, who's just left Goma and joined us live from South Africa.